And let me mention, in our hearing, when it got to be my turn, I'd heard over and over the question about, did you have proof that Russia was trying to play in the election? And of course, it turns out they only spent like $4,500. But so I said, well, you obviously came prepared to answer the Democrats' questions that you found that Russia had been manipulating things. How much manipulation did you find from China or North Korea or others? And they couldn't answer that. They only looked for Russia. And it should go without saying that some places are very good at hacking or manipulating and making it look like it was a different country.
Right?
You plant seeds that make it look like it was a different country. And as I pointed out when I was questioning Peter Strzok, the Intel Community IG, the actual IG sent his investigator, Frank Rucker, over to tell Peter Strzok, as head of the FBI's counterterrorism, and there were two other FBI individuals there, and he said, hey, we now have proof 100% that Hillary Clinton's server was hacked. And he told them the country, it wasn't Russia, and it's come out from other sources, I knew at the time, but it's China.
Yeah, of course.
And here we have all these elites from Google and YouTube and Twitter, and they're saying, oh, well, actually, we never looked for anything besides Russia. We don't know.
So they're more worried about less than $5,000?
No, they were more worried about satisfying the Democrats that were there to help them than they were about truth.
And the American people need to know, $5,000 worth of Facebook ads by Russia or whomever compared with a hacking of the Secretary of State by our greatest adversary, likely, is China. You know, and so there's very little comparison, but the news media covered one and didn't cover the other, and that's frightening. In the election, this most recent one, the midterm, we saw a lot of unusual activity. I think there was a report that said 37 states had risk of voter hacking or unusual things happening with the voting machines. We had here in Texas a church where a team supposedly in favor of Robert Francis O'Rourke, you know, Beto, going in and trading out voter guides. I don't know if you heard about that, but a team showed up and swapped out the voter guides, which is criminal activity because it was fraudulent. You know, this state has had a long history of shenanigans in the voting. Going back to LBJ, for example, who won his Senate election by 87 votes, and there were thousands of questionable votes in that election, including 200 numbered ballots sequentially in alphabetical order with the same handwriting on them that showed up.
Wasn't that the one where when investigators showed up, the courthouse burned with all the ballots?
They lost the box and all of that, yes.
Well, it was back in the 90s, and as I recall, I think it was David Brinkley and Tom Brokaw, and they were waiting on results, and Tom said, why don't you tell them that story Johnson told? He said, yeah. Well, he said, back then, it was before Watergate, and the president and the press were friendly, and the president would often come sit down in the press room and just visit with us, and apparently it was an off-year election. And so Johnson, he said, was down in the press room and had his boots up on some reporter's desk and leaning back, drinking a beer, scratching his belly. And he said, yeah, I remember when I was running back years ago, and my campaign manager and I were out in the graveyard taking down names off of tombstones of people that would vote the next day. And we came to one where it's so grown old, mossy, cruddy stuff, we couldn't really read the name. Campaign manager said, come on, Lyndon, let's go to the next one. I grabbed me and said, no, sir, this man has every bit as much right to vote as anybody else in this cemetery. And people thought that was funny, but
it's tragic.
People in Texas said, well, there's probably a ring of truth to that one.